Today I am doing for you the Liberty bag by Needle and Anchor. I was just winging how I decorated it as I went. I've put a lot of rivets everywhere to show you a good way to decorate with rivets. They're on the front. This is actually a slip pocket as well. So that was a bit fun. And then I decided to add them to the handle just for something different because I don't know, I'm really feeling rivets today. So if you would like to see how to make this, please stay tuned. Guys, let's get started. First I'm going to talk about hardware changes from what the pattern has to what I'm going to do. I don't have any gate rings. I do plan on ordering them in. I just haven't yet. So instead of gate rings that the pattern asked for, I'm going to be using 2 D-rings and then 2 swivel clips to attach the handle. And I'm going to be using small magnets, and that's pretty much it. I'm doing a contrasting thread today. I do have a teal thread that matches my fabric, but I felt like contrasting is fun. And I'm hoping that I can encourage you to do contrasting thread. And we're using this embroidered panel. So these are the slip pockets. I chose the symmetrical slip pocket. There is also an asymmetrical one that you could do as well if you wanted. So I've cut 1 out of vinyl for my outside, and then I've got 3 of the linings, and so 2 of those go towards the slip pocket inside, and then this will be the outside slip pocket. So let's get started sewing. I have got M40 thread from Vardman Threads in my machine, and I'm going to be doing a 2.5 stitch length, and I believe that stands for mils for anyone that was like millimeters. So I'm going to put 2 right sides together. Now, if you want to clip it because it's a curve, by all means, chuck some clips on. You don't have to, but it will help prevent it from slipping while you're trying to stitch. And so then I am just going to stitch forward and back to lock in the stitches, and then hope my machine doesn't eat it. Now, the fun thing about slip pockets is this particular seam that I'm doing right now, it doesn't really matter what seam allowance you do. The pattern always has a suggestion, but the bigger the seam allowance, the smaller your pocket. So it's pretty much just up to you what you want to do. I'm currently doing 3/8 of an inch. Half seems too much, quarter seems too little. So I'm just going to pin these together. Now you'll notice I'm pinning this one more than the 2 lining pieces. Vinyl has a tendency to move, and I don't want it to move out of the way. So we're going to stitch and back stitch at the start again. And you'll notice I'm chain stitching these. I always chain stitch where possible. It saves time and thread. Time because you don't have to keep trimming off tails everywhere. And then I'm just going to chop it in half here, trim the tail off here, and then I'm going to use my zigzag scissors or pinking shears. These ones are Fiskars. I like them because they're spring loaded so they don't hurt my hands to use, and I'm just going to cut off the seam allowance. Because this is a curve, I want it to sit as nice as possible, and this is the easiest way to do it. If you don't have zigzag scissors, or you don't think you'll use them, what you could do instead is along the curve just make little cuts, and that will do the same thing. So when I flip this over, the idea is, you'll notice I'm going to push it all back and press it and then flip it over, and it's going to get me right on the edge of that seam allowance. And you shouldn't have any pinching or issues. Now I'm going to decide which side I like more. I like this side more because there's a mermaid almost perfectly in the center. So I'm going to have that side up, and then we're going to top stitch along that top edge. So we're going to be doing both slip pockets at the same time. I can chop that one off. Stitch along this edge, and I'm making sure that the seam's right at the edge. You could also iron this, back stitch, and so then I'm going to do the same to this pocket. So we're just going to trim this off I do like these scissors because they still work even with the vinyl. Not too many layers of vinyl, but one's fine. And so then again, I'm going to crease this as best I can and then flip it over. Now this one's going to be a little bit more stubborn because of the thickness of the vinyl. So to combat that and the fact that I can't iron the vinyl, I'm going to put clips along the edge to hold it in place. And this is also going to help crease it to make it stay there until I get to the stitching part. So I'm going to go all the way to the edge just so it'll hold it. And then I can come to the other side. Now I'm using lots of Wonder clips so that I get a good fold on that edge. Once I've stitched it, it will also be fine. But that is just a good way to kind of hold it in place. So take my first one off. I'm going to stitch and back stitch. You might even want to put your stitch length up for this because it's vinyl. The inside one didn't matter as much. But you don't want to over stab your vinyl, especially if you have a lower quality one, as it will tear. Whereas if you do a longer stitch length, it won't. Nice and slow on the curve. You want it to be really neat because this is what people see. There you go. Now you've got a nice top stitch along there. So in our box, now what I want to grab is I'm going to grab my lining pieces, but I'm just going to grab one of them. I don't need all of them. And I'm going to move the outer piece out of my way and line this up along the bottom like so. And now I'm just going to base this around the edge so that it's held together. So one side is going to have a slip pocket and the other side I'm going to do a zipper pocket. Now you'll notice my hand's on here and then I'm kind of rotating my hand to get that curve. It's not so much moving that way, it's kind of twisting. It'll move here because that's a straight bit and then this is a curve. So again, we're just going to twist my arm. And backstitch when we get to the edge. And that's the end of my bobbin thread. So now you've got a slip pocket. If you wanted to, you could divide it in half, but I want a nice big slip pocket on this side. Grab my other bobbin. And if you hold your thread and do one full rotation, it pulls your bobbin thread up. And if it doesn't, you know you've got an issue. So I'm going to put this one aside now. And in the tub, we want to be grabbing our top and bottom outer pieces. So this one and this one. So I've done all of my outer in the vinyl. And I'm just holding everything together with alligator clips because I love a good alligator clip. So I'm going to put these right sides together. Now, depending on what fabrics you've picked, you could actually do this like half fabric, half vinyl, or you could do two different tones of vinyl or fabric. And if you didn't want this join at all, you could actually overlap the patterns and cut it out as one giant piece. But I like seams. Seams are pretty. They give like an added feature. So I'm going to pin them both or clip them both together. So we always go right sides together. And if you can hear ticking, that is my heat press, because after this we need to use the heat press. Right, so now that they're both clipped together, I always put the smallest piece on top when I can. So I'm now going to stitch, back stitch, on a joining stitch length of course, and back stitch at the end there. Clean up my clips because it's always easier to work in a clean area. And then I'm going to stitch and back stitch. back stitch. Then again, I'm going to trim this because I love chain stitching. You can chain stitch most of a bag, but I don't want to overly confuse anybody if you're new to sewing, and I don't want you to freak you out over a bag. So I'm going to, personally, I'm going to press this open. Now the pattern does actually say to bend it down and stitch, but I'm going to stitch each side because I really love top stitching. You don't have to, you can push them all down and then just stitch it down, but where's the fun in that? So I'm just stitching 1/8 of an inch, and I'm using my fingers here to hold that seam allowance open. Now obviously I can't iron it open because it's vinyl, but if you've done fabric, you definitely can. Get to the end, do a little back stitch. I'm going to trim off this other one. And then I'm just going to fling it round, and we're not going to cut the jump. We're just going to come to the other side and then top stitch the other side down. Now I'm probably going to have to move my clips so I don't knock them on the floor. If you don't have a bigger hole here, what you can do is you can roll it up like this and then hold it, and that way it's not going to hit here and distort your nice top stitching. So if you're on like a smaller machine, this is a good way to still do it. And then you get to the end and we're going to back stitch. Second one. See, I just like the look of the two stitching. It's a personal preference. You don't have to do it. Also, another way to help crease this and keep it open is I have this one's from the Vinyl Loft. It's to kind of push down any vinyl decals and stuff that you're doing, but it's also a really good way to crease your vinyl to help it to sit flat. Now you can see it did still bounce back, but there's now a gap. So holding it here, I'm not fighting the fabric from underneath. And again, if you've used actual fabric, you can just iron this open. Use my finger to flatten it out. I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to cut off this one. Now you can cut it off as soon as you can get to it. So if the weight of this is annoying you, just do like a couple of stitches and trim it straight off. Because I've got such a large table, it wasn't bothering me. Back stitch. You want to always lock in your stitches. And back stitch. So there we go. Now I've got two full outer panels. Now before I baste on my other panel, we need to go to the heat press and iron on the foam. So I'm actually going to do that in this video to show you how I'm going to do it on such a large piece, because my heat press is not this big. My heat press is already warmed up. It's actually insanely hot. This is what it looks like normally, but I always use 2 pieces of baking paper. So I'm going to have one on there, and we're basically going to make a sandwich. So I'm going to take this. Now I want as much of the weight on for the first press as possible, so I'm going to sit it there like that. And you always want to have your vinyl down. Then I'm going to take the foam and line it up like this, making sure that everything is sitting evenly. And then I'm going to hold it in place with my hand and take my second piece of baking paper and lie it over the top, creating a sandwich. Then I can just squish it down. Now, depending on how hot your heat press goes will be dependent on how long you hold it for. I tend to hold mine for around 10 seconds, give or take. And then I just come and check to see if it's stuck. And as you can see, it's not yet. So we're just going to push it down for longer. I would prefer to have to do this multiple times than melt my vinyl and wreck it, because then I have to restitch it and cut more, and it's a waste. And you'll be able to tell because you should be able to peel off this top and it stays on the vinyl. So now I'm going to flip it around this way and have this side hang off. Put the baking paper over the top. So what this is doing is stopping the glue from the foam getting on the hot plate. Just squish it down. And then you can open it and check it. See, and that is now stuck. Now that is insanely hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it from the side we've already kind of done, and I'm going to lay it flat on a table to cool down completely. That way you won't get any ripples or stretches or anything in it. And I will do the second one, and then we can go back to sewing. Right, so this is now no longer sticky at all, and it's cooled down so that I now know that that piece is done. So I'm going to take my other slip panel and line it up. Now, what we'll need to do is find the center of this. We're going to need it anyway. So I'm just going to fold it in half and find the center and do a really small clip, because I already did it on my exterior panel while I was trying to line up the embroidery. So even though the embroidery looks like it's lopsided, it is actually perfectly centered. There's just obviously more mermaid than there is tail. But it was lined up perfectly in the center. So I'm going to match those two notches and grab some clips and clip them together. Now the reason I'm clipping this is because I imagine that the vine is going to try and move on me. So by clipping them and then basting them, it can't. Now as well, if you wanted to, you could put a magnet to hold this pocket closed. So what you would do is you would install the male half on the outer slip pocket and then the inner half. But I don't want a magnet. I'm quite happy with that just being a slip pocket because it's vinyl. It is quite heavy, so it won't gape. We're also going to add in the little rivets to make sure that it doesn't gape. So I'm on a longer stitch length. I'm still going to back stitch because I don't want this to come undone. And then I'm just going to top stitch. And I'm top stitching it about 1/8 of an inch. You can go anywhere, you can go all the way up to 1/4 if that's going to be easier for you. Get to the end and back stitch. Ta-da! See how there's no gaping? Right. So the pattern now says that you can stitch across here or you can put some rivets. Because I am doing a whole ocean theme here, I'm using antique bronze and I think that rivets will look the best. So I'm going to grab my presses and my rivets. Ooh. Right. So I need to measure with a ruler, and I'm going to use a friction pen to mark it. I'm going to lay this here, and I'm going to use this measure and just do a mark there. And then I'm going to do one on this side as well. Now, I've just had a thought that could be really cool. Because I'm going to put a rivet all the way through here, I could actually put a few more along here, but just on the slip pocket part. Because I can easily get to that, I can actually add as many rivets as I want and then make them look more decorative than functional. So I'm just going to punch my hole there and here, and then I'll see how I feel. They won't hurt to put in, and they might just look really cool. Now there's no right or wrong way to insert rivets. I personally always like to push it from the top because that's the way the hole punch did it. And I find it easier to push them through down than I do up, but you can do them either way. That was one of the questions I got asked at my retreat, my workshop, so I just thought I'd answer that here. So I'm going to lay it down and squish it. Oops. Preferably not take the end out with me. Like that. So now I'm looking at that going, do I want some more? And I think I do. So the first thing I want to do is grab a ruler because I want them to be even. So I'm going to actually just grab one of my zipper swatch templates so that I can get all the way around nice and easy. And I'm thinking I might do them 1.5 inches apart. I'm really hoping this will work out, but that's also why I'm using a friction tester, so that if my maths is wrong, we're all good. And my maths was wrong. So that doesn't actually work. So I'm just going to rub those marks off. And instead, I'm going to find the center. Do one right in the center like that. And then work out how much space is between here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So halfway between here is there. And so we'll just do a few. And then halfway between there is there. So instead of doing heaps, I'm just going to do a few. You can always add more in between these. Right, so I'm going to lift this up and I'm going to pull this so it hangs kind of over the edge to make sure that I'm not going to get the other piece. So we're going to go there. And there. And any marks I have left will just come off with a wet cloth. Or you can steam it. Just going to push my rivets in. And see, already that looks super fun. I won't do any more than that because I don't want to take away from my embroidery design. It's just like an added little extra, I guess. So I'm clicking all the backs on and then I can get rid of that hole punch. Bring over this one and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to hang it slightly over the edge and then just squish it down. Oops, that one didn't squish enough. There we go. You could even use smaller capped rivets, the ones that aren't as long as this for decorative purposes. Whoops. Or you can make sure they're just squished properly. So there we go. There's that. So that's now our outer panel done. We've done one inner slip pocket. So now we're going to do the other inner slip pocket. Take off my alligator clips. And I use 2 because of the bigger size pieces. And so I'm doing my inner pocket a little bit differently. Not that that should surprise anybody. So I'm just doing a Tory pocket. Where's my bit? That one. So I'm just going to line this up. No, that's the wrong size too. We'll just grab this. This has got all the sizes. That makes it a bit quicker. So I'm going to line it up. So this is my fold up this end. And I'm just going to trace around it. Now I'm not doing my accent on this, mainly because I really wanted to see all of my fabric. So that's why I chose to do it this way. So I'm going to lift this up. And I'm going to line it up so it's a little bit down like that. And I'm just going to stitch the true long lines. We're not going to stitch the short edges because you'll find that you can turn your thing through better. One, swing it all the way around and then just jump to the other side. Back stitch, stitch, back stitch. Trim off the tail, trim your jump stitch, which is that stitch between the 2 sides. And then that one there. And so now we want to, I'm just going to bring it over the edge of my table and pinch. And if you make sure it's all lined up square, you'll get this nice and centered. You'll notice I also push on the end of my scissors with my finger. It just helps to snip it without hurting your hand over here. We're going to get about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch away from the end, and then we're going to make it into a triangle. So we're triangling out the corners. So I'm going to lift it up, over, and I'm going to finger press that nice and firm. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. Then I can push this through, and I'm going to hook my thumbs into those corners and kind of push them out like that. So I'm just doing that. Then I'm going to lay it down and finger press both sides. Now, if you've used waterproof canvas, finger pressing is enough. Because I have used fabric and lining, I'm going to go and iron this so that it sits perfectly flat. So I'll be right back. I put it in the heat press, so that was nice and quick. It's nice and flat. Now we need a zipper. So I'm going to take my zipper tape. You don't always have to undo it. Sometimes you can just pull it out if you need a little bit. I'm going to singe that end because very clearly I didn't do it last time. Grab my scissors and I'm going to cut it the total length of the zipper pocket. And that way we're going to definitely sew in the sides so we don't have to seal them or cover them at all. Now, before I get carried away, I'm just going to seal that end as well. And I'm using a Smooth Criminal zipper pull today. So I'm going to crack the zip. You don't want to crack it too far. A couple of inches is all you really need. I'm going to slide in one side and then pinch both of those with those fingers. And then I'm going to push it in. And if you look down into the zipper, you can see the teeth meet up. So you just want them to be even. And then I wrap it around my finger. I think I've had too much caffeine today. Wrap it around my finger and wiggle. Now, depending on how well you lined them up, will depend on how good the wiggle goes. I have a sneaking suspicion I have not lined them up properly. Because usually when you wiggle, it should just come straight down. Nope. One side is stuck. That's never good. And I didn't do enough singeing. One side in, other side in. Apparently today is not my day for zippers. But that's alright. It's on. We're going to wiggle. We're going to wiggle. And put it roughly in the center. That was a little bit past, but that's okay. So now I'm going to lay the zipper the way I want it to close. Pick up this with that flat and open and just lay it over the top of the zipper. Now, I'm going to start. So my zipper zips that way. So I'm going to flip that over and I'm just going to start just on the other side of it. And I'm going to stitch around, making sure that the zipper's all lined up. Needle down, pivot over the end. Needle down, pivot again. Like this. And when I get to here, I'm going to put my needle down and zip it open to where I've already done. And then over that end as well. And get back to the start and back stitch. Trimming off all the tails that you see. So this is what we should have. So your zipper comes out to the edge. Then we're just going to flop this bit down and it should line up perfectly with the other side. So now I'm just going to stitch the sides. We don't want to stitch the bottom shut because this is where I'm going to turn the bag through. So That's one side, and then trim the tails. Mainly we trim the tails so they're not in the way later, because you don't want them to be popping out of your bag. So if you always trim the tails as you go, you won't have a whole bunch of tails annoying you when it comes time to finish up the bag. Back stitch, trim. So then you can zip it all the way closed, all the way open. I'm going to leave the zipper pocket open so that we can definitely turn it through. So now you need your template back again so that we can install some magnets. So a way to do this, I'm actually going to just cut out that inner circle so that I can line everything up. Like that. So I'm just cutting out that circle in the middle. And so now I can just lay the template straight over the top. And then in those holes, draw the line up circle like that. And then we grab the other side. Now, if you're worried that yours is not perfectly center, flip it over the other way. So if you missed, or you think you're missed, or you're worried, you just line it up the other way like this, and then draw the circles. Because those two sides will go together. I mean, I'm not worried, I could have done it that way, but just say that you've slightly overcut it or something. If you flip it over, it's going to line up perfectly with the other lot. So, now we need our magnets and our gaskets. And then we're nearly out of hardware, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to take one gasket for all of them and just line them up. And it works out really well because this sits just above the slip pocket. And I'm drawing the two long parts of the gasket. So the center dot goes over the dot that we made. And then we're drawing the two lines because that's the bit we're going to cut. 1 and 2. So now we need a craft knife. I'm going to use my pen knife just because I thought it was really cool to own a pen knife. I like knives, it's fine. And I'm just going to cut the straight lines. Now this pen knife just happens to be the perfect length. So if I start at one edge and poke it through, it makes the perfect size cut. I got this from Spotlight. I think it was like $5. I just thought it was really cool. And then we want to use some fray stopper. So one of the ladies from my workshop, their Spotlight sells it. So they grabbed me one, which is awesome because I was definitely missing my fray stopper. Fabric glue is good, but it's just not quite the same. Now I'm going to cut the nozzle off because this is brand new. You'll notice I'm not using my fabric scissors for this. Right. So now I'm just putting it over the nozzle and tilting it because this stuff is super runny. So I'm not just going to pour it out all over everything. So I'm putting my finger and then just tipping it like you do with nail polish. When you're trying to get nail polish on a cotton bud, you push it up against it and then just flick it. And that will be enough. So that little quick flick, I don't know if you can see just here. See how dark it is? That's how much came out with that tiny little flick. Right. Onto the magnets. Now you can pick which side you want to be the male and the female. It doesn't really matter. First thing I'm going to do is separate them though. Sometimes they don't like to separate. It's because they're so strong, but that's okay. So I'm going to stab I'm picking female on this side, apparently. So I'm going to stab them through the holes like that, and then put one of the gaskets on the back and fold them outwards, like so. And then I'm going to do the second one. So I'm going to have both females on one side and both males on the other. You don't want to switch and swap it. It gets too complicated. Push it through the hole. Maybe, maybe not. Come on. I'm in the hole, it's just not coming through. Sometimes I use my snips to just push it down like that. There we go. Grab a gasket. You always want to put a gasket. Gaskets help to hold everything in place. If you wanted to as well, you could put a stabilizer piece behind here. If they were the big magnets, I would probably use stabilizer, but because they're the small ones, I think they'll be all right. On, gasket, like that, and bend them outwards. I both like and dislike the bendable magnets. They're good because I don't need my cam press for them, but they do also hurt my fingers, which is why I now also have rivet magnets. Oh, that finger's actually quite sore now, but anyway. Right, so I've now got my magnets installed. You can, if you're worried, line them up, clip it together, make sure it all actually clips together, like that. And then when you hold it, it should be even, which it is. Take that off, pop them aside. Now we're going to move on to our gusset piece. So, you should have one lining and one outer with foam on it, which mine is over there because I left it there to dry. And we should have, so the gusset pieces are slightly different shaped. The inner ones have like this inner bit. So this piece, I cut out the outsides first, which have the foams. The foams on the back like that. And then I cut the inner pieces because it's got like a little bit of a divot here. So apart from that, we don't need that. And same with the base. So I'm going to start with my lining because that's what I've got here. And then I'm just going to put right sides together like this. And I'm going to make sure I'm on a joining stitch length, and I'm going to stitch and back stitch to lock those stitches in. And same again. And then the other side. Back stitch, that was probably too many. And there is our inner gasket. Not gasket, gusset. Wow. So, I'm going to fold it in half and I'm going to find the center. Like this. And then we're going to take one of our main lining panels and fold it in half. Line it all up. Find the center. And I might as well find the center of the other one while I'm at it. This one's going to be a little bit more stubborn because of the zipper. Zippers don't like to be folded very often. Excellent. Pick a side, any side, and I'm going to line up the center with the center and start clipping it together. I'm going to make all the clips face the gusset, and I'm going to make the seam allowance here face towards the center, like that. It's always easier to make it face towards the center. I find the bags sit nicer. You're welcome to ignore me, but that is what I have personally found. So now I'm going to come up to this edge and start working my way down. And then when we get to here, it should fit when we curve it because, again, it's a 3D object. Voila! So that's one side done. Let's come up and do the other side. No, wait, I've got to face them the other way. We still want them to face the gusset. Right, so we're going to just hold that as a 3D object, make sure everything's nice and even, and then come and chuck a few clips on it, like that. Now, because my pocket, I don't think I'm going to get the whole bag through that easily. So what I'm going to do now that I know that it's all going to fit, I'm going to take one clip further from the join here. So I'm going to take all of these off and not stitch that section. You might think I'm crazy, why did I bother putting it together? And that's just to make sure it's going to fit perfectly. So I'm now going to leave this gap open and so I can turn the bag through there because that's a bigger hole and it's going to be easier. So I'm going to start at one end over here. I'm going to stitch and I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm just going to stitch around until I get to this clip and then back stitch and then stop. Tidy up my clips because it's always good to have a clean area. And then I'm just going to jump to this one here and continue. And I'm making sure that I'm doing that on the side that isn't a zipper pocket because it's going to be easier to stitch it up later. We're going to stitch it through the zipper pocket. So I always like to leave the opposite side open because I find it easier to maneuver, personally. Right, so now I've got a gap. Now I'm going to do the same to this side, except I am going to stitch the whole way around this one. Just because I don't believe that I'll be able to get the whole bag through the zipper pocket. So use as many clips as you need. Again, I'm making sure these are going to face that way, even though we haven't stitched them down yet. And then come up to the top edge and start clipping. And then hold it as a 3D object to make sure that it's going to fit. And add all the clips in. And then here. All the clips need to face the gusset. Mainly because they're easy to pull off. I mean, you don't have to do that. And if you're using pins, obviously that doesn't matter at all. Right, it's all clipped, so I'm going to pull it all aside, start up this end and go all the way around. Across the bottom and making sure that those seam allowances don't pop up. Move the clips out of the way. And that is now the lining complete. So I'm going to turn it out the right way because that's how I'll be putting it in the bag when we get to joining it. So I may as well do it now while I've got it all in my hand. And make sure that you don't end up in the pocket. So there we go. There's a hole in the bottom, but that's meant to be there. We are now ready to do the outside. So first up, we're going to need the connector piece and some double-sided tape. And I'm just going to put it right down the center like that and snip. Fold each side into the center. Like so. And then I'm going to top stitch. You also want to make sure that that's going to go on, because that's what I'm going to be doing, I guess. So, stitch length up to, for me, 3 3/4, and then I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch each side of the center, like that. Oh, and I just ran out of bobbin thread. Right, I'll be right back. I'm just going to do another. Let's try that again. So now I have to also try and get through all those holes that I just created, which shouldn't be too difficult. You also noticed that I didn't backstitch then. Right, so now that I've got that top stitch, that should be holding down those back bits so it's not going to move. I'm now going to fold it in half and cut it. And then I need to measure down from the top. So there. But before I stitch it down, I also need to put my D-ring on, because I'm using D-rings because I don't have a gate clip. So the D-ring is going to go in the center like that. And I'm actually going to put rivets each side since I'm doing rivets everywhere else. I thought that would look fun. There, there. And so now I'm just going to tack each side at the seam. Ooh. So that's one side. And I'm going to tack the other side. Awesome. And then trim off all of the tails that are just everywhere. These snips are nearly blunt. So this is what we've got. Now, obviously, if you're using a gate clip, it's going to clip onto here, so you don't need your D-ring. We also don't need to be too worried about lining this piece up in the center because there's excess there so that we can line it up how we please. And then we're going to cut off everything that hangs over the edge anyway. So there, so there. And again, we're just going to stitch along the edge, pull it out, trim it off, and then do the other side. I'm essentially just basing it in place. Now, if you didn't want to do this kind of clip, you could do, if you didn't want to use as much hardware, if you're trying to like limit your hardware, instead of doing it this way, you could have folded it and stitched it down this way and then just had a square ring so that you could attach your handle to the square ring. But I decided to try and do it close to the pattern. And then I can just chop off these bits and voila. Now I might actually wait for the rivets because I have to think about the seam allowance on each side. So I'm just going to leave them. And now we're going to make the gusset. So I need my base piece, which I forgot to grab before. So because this is non-directional, just put two sides together. You can use clips if you want to. You don't have to. I usually don't. And back to a joining stitch length might be more helpful. So there's one side. Now I'm going to do the same as I did before and flatten this out and top stitch each side. But I might join this bit first so that I don't have to keep changing my stitch length. So sew both of them on and then I'll do both the top stitches. Like that. Then I'm going to open this one out as well and finger press that flat. Flip it over, hold it flat. Now I'm going to move my clips. And I'm going to roll this up so that I can get to each side. Fling it around, up and over. So this is just going to hold it flatter to make it easier to stitch in later, as well as giving me a uniformed top stitch look all over the bag. So again, I'm going to come underneath, stitch across, pivot round, and stitch across. Trim all the tails, and so now we've got our base piece. And because my top stitching is darker, it's not standing out. So even if you were to make a mistake, you can only subtly see it. Like you can see it's there, but it's not in your face. I did contemplate doing a white stitching with this, but obviously decided against it. So now I'm going to find the center between these 2 points. And you'll notice I always do that after I finish stitching. Just because it's the center beforehand, if you accidentally don't do an even seam allowance on both sides, it will mean that it's not even. So you do it after you stitch. Now this one has already got it, so I don't have to put a center mark on there, but this one doesn't. So I'm going to fold it over, line it all up, and just make a really small clip like that. Now, again, if you wanted to on the back, you could add rivets along here just to make it decorative, like I did here. I actually might do that. That might look really cool because otherwise our back is quite plain compared to the rest of it. And I want to have some accents. And as you can tell, I'm just kind of making this up as we go about how to decorate bags. There's no right or wrong way, do you? Do it however you like, really. So I'm just going to grab a nice long ruler. All my other rulers are over there. And I'm still going to use a friction pen so that I can wipe off any incorrect marks that I may or may not do. So there's the center. So I want one there. And then how many did I put? 2 each side. So we want to allow seam allowance. So let's do that. And then 2 each side. So what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2 and a half, half, 1, 2, there. So I'm going 2.5 and then there. So that's where I've just marked my rivets. So they will be the same kind of distance apart as the other ones. And we'll have the same amount on both sides, which I also think is a little bit important. Some symmetry. To You can even go this way so you can get to the holes easier. And there. So again, you can totally skip this step. It's not necessary, it's just pretty. And I like pretty. See how it's already added something? And rivets aren't expensive. This is like a cheaper way to upscale your bag. And even if they were expensive, it still looks cool and is still worth it. Right. So now I just need to go along and squish them all. You also notice these don't poke up as far because there's foam behind these, as opposed to the other ones that just had a single layer of vinyl. So there we go. That has now given the bag just a little bit of decoration on the back. So now we're just going to join it. So we're going to join center to center. Help with our clips. I can get rid of those. And so I'm going to use a lot more clips on this side than I did the other side, because there's vinyl and foam that won't want to bend as easily as the fabric does. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and then work my way around and make sure that this curve fits into that curve pretty perfectly. Line it up, clip it down, lots more clips. So as you can see, I've used probably nearly double the amount of clips, if not triple, that I did on the other side. And that is because it's easy to work with. The other side, that is. The other side's easy to work with. Even if you've done fabric on the outside, you'll still have interfacing and foam that you're still fighting against. So you will most likely find that your experience is the same as this. Okay, so this time we don't have to have an opening, so we can just stitch all the way around. So I'm going to stitch. Actually, I'm going to go back to a joining stitch length because that's important. Put the clips away as you go to keep your area clean. And back stitch at the top. And then just check your inside to make sure that it all went nice and smoothly. If you've got any sections that kind of pinched, you just undo about that much and then flatten it out. When I'm in too much of a hurry in some of my other videos, you will see that I sometimes even pinch it. It's nothing to be ashamed of, it happens. Stuff moves. That's why we use lots and lots of clips to try and help prevent that. So again, I've done the bottom bit pretty much up to the base, and then I'm going to change it up and come up to the top, always making sure that my clips face the gusset, because as you can see from my sewing, I can pull them off as I'm sewing, so long as I'm going slowly. Can't go full pelt and do it. You're more likely to get your finger. So again, that fitted lovely. I'm also going to push the D-ring to face the other way so that it's out of the way. And then I can add my After I've stitched these two together, I can then go back and put the rivets in that I want to. Again, because I'm trying to have like a uniformed look. And they won't necessarily be doing a lot because it's already stitched into the bag. It's probably, for my benefit, decorative. But I said that funny, decorative. But I like the look of the rivets because it goes with the ocean theme and the antique bronze and everything else. So again, making sure that your D-ring has been pushed to the other direction if you've done a D-ring. And if you haven't, cool, you don't have to worry about it. You also, if you're going to use a gate ring, you're also not going to put the rivets because you don't want to make the space too small. Up to the top and back stitch. Now again, you want to check your curves. You want to look inside the bag and make sure everything is smooth. I know you can't really see in there, but always check. Right, onto my rivets. So see how I've got enough room for a rivet each side? I just think it'll look cool. But again, you can definitely not do this. It is my personal preference on a design from the fabric that I've chosen. I may not do this if I did a different fabric. So I'm going to go in between the stitches, punch a hole, other side, make sure that's perfectly in the center, and other side. That sounded dramatic, but that's just because the thing was in the way. So again, I'm going to push them through. And it just looks cool. Okay. And then I need my other press to squish them down. I know this is a lot of extra time I've added in to the video, but it's just, you know, to show you that you can use stuff for other stuff. It doesn't just have to be purposeful. Sometimes it can just be pretty. And then that's almost the end of the rivets. I will also still do it to my handle. I'll rivet my handle on just to keep everything matching. And even if you wanted to, you could put rivets all the way up the handle. To keep with the theme of everything. We'll see how I feel when I get to that. All right, so done and done. So now I'm going to take my lining, which I already turned right sides out. I always like my zipper pocket or against the back. So when I look into the bag, you've got pretty paddle and then zipper pocket. So with that being said, this side that had the straight rivets will be the side that the back pocket sits against. So I'm going to put it into the bag that way. Then I'm going to come and start at this top small edge, and I'm going to add rivets. Not rivets, wonder clips. And I'm going to make them face the lining because that's the way we're going to stitch it. Move my way around. I'll get about halfway and then I'm going to come to this end and then move back to make sure that there's no buckling or anything. Make sure it all matches. Then I can come to this side and I'm going to do the same thing. Again, always making sure that my clips are facing inwards because that's how I'm going to put it under the machine. Right. Voila. So I'm going to start just kind of somewhere in the center. And I'm going to make sure I'm on a joining stitch length. I'm going to back stitch. And then around I go. Not too fast. And you want to just pull this top bit back because it does tend to try and get in the way. Being the size bag that it is going to fight you a little bit. So I am kind of almost going to bring it up and around and stitch nice and slowly so that nothing moves because I can already feel it trying. So I'm here, then I'm going to pivot and do that little short edge like this. Get to the next lot of stitches, pivot. Now this side will be easier because there's not all those clips in the way. So please know that the first side is the most difficult. Whoops. Move the clips. Like that. Over the edge. Like that. And then down the side. And we're going to go join back up with our first lot of stitching. And then once you get there, you can just back stitch to lock it in and pull it out. And see, I had a tail. It was driving me insane. Now to turn the bag out. So I'm going to pull the lining and then I've got this giant gap where I can just push the bag so I can grab onto it and basically just push it through the hole. So I'm making the lining completely cover the bag like this. Once you've got it to here, I know for a fact it'll turn easy. I'm not pulling it too hard because I don't want to pop or break anything. We're just going to pull that out and then I'm going to stick my hand back in and push on all of those seams. And see, I checked them all so they all sit really nicely. Push out that top corner like that. And then I'm going to reach into the zipper pocket and grab both of these and pull that piece of the lining. Not all the lining, but just the bit with the hole through the zipper pocket so that now I can stitch it shut. So again, we've still got those center markings to make it easy to line up. And we already checked to make sure it fits so we know it's going to. So just for ease's sake, I'm going to add some clips on there. But as you can see, it sits perfectly in line anyway. It just might not when I start maneuvering the bag. So it's better to be safe than sorry, so just add clips anyway. Right. I'm just going to start where I left off, do some back stitches, and then stitch around. Push it down. And then I'm going to close up this zip as well. So I'm just going to tuck it under with my fingers and stitch it. Now, if you can't hold it in place like that, that's totally fine. Just use some wonder clips to hold it in place. tuck it in. And then we've just got top stitching left to do. So your bag should join together. You just want to make sure that all of that's joined. But see how this sits out? That's because we haven't top stitched. So you can top stitch it from this side, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to turn the bag inside out. I know this seems like a lot of effort I'm going to, but I personally think I get a nicer top stitch when I'm top stitching on the outside piece. And the easiest way to do that with this particular bag is going to be from the outside like that. Now I'm not pushing it all the way through. It doesn't have to be flat around there. But what we are going to do now is get some Wonder Clips and roll this so it's right on the edge and then clip it in place. Because we want a nice even top stitch. Now if you're new to top stitching and you're a little bit worried that you're going to mess it up, do a full 1/4 inch of a top stitch. It's not going to wreck the bag at all. It's just going to make it a little bit easier for you. What else I need to do is I'm going to grab my stiletto and dig out this corner because it's sitting funny like that. You also may wish to, if you're on like a domestic machine, you're going to want to squish this end because that's where the most of the bulk is. So I'm squishing it with some flat pliers. So I got these on eBay and they've got no teeth in here. They're perfectly smooth. They're a leather tool, but they work just as well on vinyl. Oh, and I just broke that clip. So the main place I think I'm going to have issues is on these ends because of all the bulk. Next time, maybe cut the bulk out. So we're just going around and pinning everything so that there's no ripples and there's not going to be any issues. It's easier to pin it now than try and do this while you're maneuvering around the bag. So again, I'm going to pull out that end and I'm going to squish it. As much as I can, which is why I use 2 hands, because it squishes it better. You can also get squishing plates for your cam press. They're actually designed to do with the key fob ends, but I reckon that they would work the same way as these. You could still just squish down a seam nice and flat, as long as you could get it all lined up. All right, we're up to top stitching. So I'm all the way on 4. You want a nice long top stitch. You could go even higher, really. And I want to start not right on the bulk because that's going to be the tricky bit. So I want to start just off it. So I'm going to take off that clip there and slide underneath. And then I'm not going to back stitch, which is the first notable difference. Because we're going all the way around, there's no reason to have all that bulky stitching that can be seen. So I'm not going to. And I'm actually stitching at a 1/4 inch. If you've got a cylinder arm, I would highly recommend doing this on your cylinder arm. Then you wouldn't have to turn it inside out. You could leave it the other way and just have the bulk hang off the side of the machine. So I'm going to stop with the needle down and then I'm going to readjust again. I'm coming up towards the chunky edge. So I'm going nice and slowly because of the bulk. And then we're coming back around. Now these tails are really long, so I'm actually going to trim them off now so that they don't get in my way. And then take the clips off. Now squishing down that end actually helped quite a lot. I thought I was going to have more trouble going through it than I did. Always stop with your needle down before you readjust the bag. And the reason we're top stitching is to make everything stay sitting where you want it to. I know you can't really see much from there. Oh no, I ran out of bobbin. Oh, that's annoying. So I only got about halfway. It's disappointing. Right, so you do need quite a few bobbins for this bag. So I'm just going to wind another one. I'll be right back. I just thought I'd talk quickly about why I go through so many bobbins. And the simple answer is because I don't fill them all the way. And I don't like to fill them all the way because when I fill it all the way, the bobbin gives me issues and gives me knots and carries on. Whereas if I only fill it about 3/4 of the way, yes, I have to do more bobbins than normal, but I find that I don't have issues right at the start. So like right now, if I had it completely full, it's most likely going to loop underneath and cause me grief, and therefore takes more time than is necessary. So I'm going to stitch over the last 3 stitches and then go back and stitch over them again. You notice I didn't do back stitching. That is also partly to do with the fact that it is a new bobbin. And when I back stitch with new bobbins, I don't know why, but the machine does not like it. So I just don't do it where possible. Alright, so now I'm up to where I left off. And I'm coming into the bulky part, but it has been squished down a lot, so it's not really giving me any grief, which is awesome. Alright, so now that I'm back to the start, I'm going to stitch through 3 stitches and then back stitch. And that's locked them in without having a crazy amount of back stitching all piled into one section. Now, my top stitching is going to have 2 start-stop points because I ran out of thread, but I still made them look quite minimal. And I'm just going to melt the ends, and I know you can see it, but see how it's very mildly, hold on, see how it's very mildly, it's just literally 2 lots of stitches. So from a distance, it doesn't stand out, which is what we want. So now I'm just going to push this through, back the other way, and it will fight you a bit, but that's because it's a very structured bag and I've covered mine in vinyl. Now we just need to do a handle. Now I'm not doing the handle the same way that they did because I don't have her fancy handle holdery bits. But that is the bag. So, handle. I've made it the same length that they use in the pattern, and I'm going to do most of it the same. We're going to put double-sided tape down the center. Like so. And then I'm just going to peel the backing off and fold both sides into the center. Now, you could add fabric over the top of this, or I'm probably going to do rivets because I think they're going to look cool. You could do an all fabric handle, although I do find they get dirty quick. Doesn't even matter if you put Scotch Guard on them, it's just your hands are constantly touching it. They tend to get dirty a bit quicker. So if you are going to make a fabric handle, I do suggest you use darker tones. Like, don't make a white handle out of fabric. If you want to make a white handle, 100% do it out of vinyl, so at least it could be wiped clean. Also, prints hide dirt quite well on handles too. So I could have actually done this particular fabric that I've used for this bag in a fabric handle, and it would have still looked cool. And it wouldn't get dirty as quick. You still Scotch Guard them, they just last longer. So while I'm on my nice long stitch length, I am now going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch each side of the center. And I've worked out how to do that with my plate, which is why I'm doing it wrong sides up. So you can see my fingers are pushed right against each side and my nails kind of hold it in place. And it sews it perfectly. Then we're going to swivel it around and come and do the other side. So again, my fingers are doing all the work and they're not even moving. You could do the same thing with two magnetic guides if you don't have fingernails. That is my strap now. And I'm just going to cut the jump stitches at each end because I did back stitch, so they don't need to be there. Like that. And I'm also going to make sure on the back that both sides have been stitched down, otherwise it's likely to pop up. If you accidentally did that, just put some fabric glue in the gap and then use your Wonder Clips to hold it in place and then leave it a few hours to dry. Right, that's the last of our hardware. So I'm going to put the join side against the flat side and I'm going to make it long enough to do 2 rivets because I'm all about rivets today, apparently. Didn't think that was going to be the case when I woke up, but here we are. So I'm going to do that side, and then I'm going to do the same to this side. And the reason I've clipped it is so I can come over here and match what I've done so that they are the same length, because that's what we want. We want the same length so that they're both even. So there we go. That's what it's going to look like. Now I just need my hole punch and my rivet set and the rivets. So if we just adjust this so that you can see everything, there we go. I'm going to start with this. So I'm going to come up to the top and do it nice and close to there. And then I'm going to do another one down here. Now, this is purely because it's going to look pretty. You could just do one rivet. You could also just sew them together. I've been doing that quite a lot lately in videos, but that's why I'm doing something different today. So now that I've got my holes, I can push these through, and as soon as you've got your rivets in, you can take these off because it's already lined up for you. Clip that on. Clip that one on. No, that one's smaller. I have 2 size rivets in one container. It was my mistake when I did it, but I can, like, they're noticeably different. One's 9 and one's 7, so I can see it as I'm using them. So that's one side. Now for the other side. One. Yep. Clip it on there. And 2. Clip and clip. So now it's just a matter of, do I want to put rivets all the way along here? And to be honest, I think I do. If I attach it to the bag just to have a look at what's going on, I think that rivets all the way along the handle would really tie it in with the rivets here and on the back. So I don't think the 2's doing it for me. It's a good way to be decorative without having to sew fabric on. So I am in fact going to put more rivets. So the first thing I want to do is find halfway, and I'm going to draw on it with my pen like that. So that's where halfway is. And I want to spread them out. I don't want to have them really close together. I'm thinking like 1, 2, 3. So I'm thinking just 3 more. Have them well spaced out. And I can eyeball a third pretty well, which is why I can just draw it on like that. And then if you want to check it, you can line them up. So there's that one. Oh, actually, I didn't line them up very well. My bad. So this one. And this one. Right. So again, you don't have to do this. This is just, again, pretty. Hole punch. Hole punch. That one's right at the top in the center. That one. And that one. See how that just looks cool? I don't know. I like it. I think it looks fun. And they're spaced out enough that it's not going to be super uncomfortable to wear the bag either. Now I'm just going to clip the backs on. Oops. And 5. And then just squish them. Cool. So that is now like a really fun handle. And I just need to come along the edge and do the Tory squish. So I just roll that in my hands and then I'm just gonna push it back and forth. Another thing you could do if you wanted to is grab it and then grab your flat pliers and give it a bit of a squish. So you could go all the way along there, but just be really careful that you're not too far in with your pliers. You want to be right on the edge. Otherwise, you're going to damage your vinyl further in. So I personally prefer to squish. But that is your choice. So like here, where there's a lot of bulk, I might grab these. Like so. But there you go. Then you can just attach your handle to these bits here. And if you wanted to, you could also do a tassel to hang off the side. That would also be super cute. And then the bag just magnets together like so. And that is your bag done. I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope you potentially learned something as well. But there you go. That is the Liberty bag by Needle and Anchor. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.